In this lab, we are going to see how computers communicate with each other by knowing their identities. So first, let's verify the identities on these computers. Well, to verify the identities, I am going to go on computer A or PC A, and in the desktop there is a run command. So now we are in command prompt. On your PC you can also go to like start, go to run and then type cmd and you will get the same prompt. So once you reach in the command prompt you can type ipconfig. Once we type this command we are going to get some information, but these are not the enough information we are looking for. So for that what we can do is we can type ipconfig space /all. After using this command we can get some more information. Now let's discuss about this information one by one. So the first information what we see here, which is the MAC address. So the MAC address we see here, this one is in IP version 4 format, and another MAC ID we also see that is in IP version 6 format. So this is our first identity what we discussed in our theory. The another identity we see here, which is the IP address what we also discussed. So this is IP version 4 format as well. So this is our second level of identity we see here. Since we are in here, so let's also discuss few more information. Right now we also see here the subnet mask. So what is subnet mask? So the subnet mask is simple language. It's nothing but will tell us about the network plus the host information. Well, the subnet mask is 32-bit, and how are we going to know about this 32-bit? Basically IP version 4 is in 32 bits, so these subnet masks are all having like 4 groups and every group has 8 bits. So if you calculate this all, it becomes 32-bit. So simple way to understand the subnet mask about its network and host, if we see if 255 is being defined under the IP address, which means it is going to match the exact network address. So we see like these are the 3 group has been defined as 255, which means these first 3 numbers are going to match in the IP addresses, which is going to be remain same on the computers. However, this 0 says it can be any, which means you can provide any IP address on the host. So right now we have provided IP address on this host, which is .11. So what happens when you having like different PC, you are also going to provide the IP address. If you want that PC to be same network, you are going to provide the same group, which is 192.168.10. It's like 255, 255, 255, right? This is first 3 going to be matched, and the fourth can be anything. So that is basically going to be IP address for that computer. So right now let's example we are going to assign the different IP address, which is 12. We cannot assign the same IP address on another computer, otherwise it's going to be conflict. So as per the IP addressing, I have already assigned the IP addresses on this computer. So PC A has an IP address which is 192.168.10.11, and then PC B has the same series IP address, which is first 3 numbers are going to be matched. The fourth is going to be different because it is belong to the host IP address, so it is 12. Same is the server has .10 and PCC has .13, so it's 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So these all computers or server are in the same network. So let's say they belong to the same network called network A, right, for our example purpose. The another information we see here in IP addressing, which is IP version 6. We haven't assigned the IP version 6 address, otherwise we could have seen the IP address pin here. One more information is really important, which is default gateway. So we are not using default gateway at this point, otherwise we would see the default gateway as well. So what is use of the default gateway? Let's have a very simple example to understand this default gateway. Let's say we have already created the network A, right, and we had assigned the IP addressing, which is 192.168.10 .xx, which means it can be any IP addresses. Now for example, in our office we also have the different network, which is going to be network B, and that network is going to be assigned the IP address which is 192.168.20. this is different, and xx, which means can be any IP address. So this third octet is different in both cases. So if this network would like to communicate with each other, they are not going to communicate because they are belong to two different networks. And for that reason, what they need is they need a default gateway. So default gateway is going to be act as a router in between them. So network A going to communicate with router, and then router going to pass the traffic to network B. Same will happen in vice versa. When network B would like to communicate with network A, the router is going to tell network B that how you can reach to network A. The one more use of default gateway is accessing the internet. For example, you are maybe sitting in your home, right? This is your home, and you are using one of the laptop. So what happens, like when you would like to access internet, what you do, you go to your ISP, and then ISP going to provide you some kind of wireless router. Wireless router is going to be having the antenna. So by using the wireless connectivity, you connect with your router, and then router is actually going to connect with your local internet service provider, and then internet service provider is going to connect with his own upstream internet service provider. So that is how these all ISPs are connected all together, and that is how at the end we are able to access the internet. So this is the use of the default gateway, because when you are in your home, you belong to the network which is connected between your router and the laptop, but you do not know about the network which is beyond this router. So to access the other network, for example, you would like to access google.com and you do not know the IP address for the google.com. So what happens, you make query to your router, and your router takes information to your ISP, and then ISP reach out to the Google server and get you to the page back to your laptop. So that is the use of the default gateway. Now let's discuss about very important information here, which is DNS server. So what is DNS server? So the DNS server is nothing but it's help us to convert from name to IP, or sometimes it also convert from IP to name. So what is use of converting from name to IP or IP to name? In our last example, we saw we were able to access google.com. So what happens when you are going for google.com, it is not actually IP address, right? It is the host name or the domain name. So what happens, google.com has like thousands of IP addresses connected in their network. So we are not going to remember all those thousands of IP addresses, right? It doesn't make any sense. So what we do, we just type the host name or the domain name, and then in backend this host name converts into IP addresses with the help of DNS server. So we will discuss about the DNS server in a moment, but this is the use of DNS server where it converts from name to IP address. So we discussed about the two identities here. The first one was the MAC ID, second one was the IP address. Now what about the third identity what we discussed, which was host name? Well, to identify the host name of your PC, all you can do is you can type host name in command prompt and you will get the detail about your computer name. If I'm typing here and I press enter, I'm not going to get any information. It's because it is packet tracer and it doesn't support all the commands, and that's the reason we do not see the host name in here. But you can use this command on your PC and you will definitely see the computer name on your PC. So we were able to understand about the identities about the computer, but where these identities are configured, so let's have a look upon that. Well, to configure the identities, all we can do is we can go to in packet tracer in IP configuration, and here we can see the options we can configure those identities or information. So I have configured static IP information in here. In static IP information, I need to put IP addresses manually, right? So this is kind of possible if I have like 5 to 10 maximum computers, then I can assign IP addresses on all those 5 to 10 computers. But if you have like hundreds and maybe thousands of computers in your large enterprise offices, so this option is not going to be suggestible option, because in that case it is likely to make mistakes and there might be the chances the other PC are going to use the same IP address, and there may be some IP conflicts is going to happen in the network. So this is going to be more trouble in the large enterprise offices. So in that case, what we can do is we can use the DHCP option. So what happened in DHCP option, let's say this is PC is going to query to one of the DHCP server, and then DHCP server will have the pool of IP addresses like 192.168, then 10.xx. We have created the pool. Then the PC going to query to DHCP server will going to ask, can you provide me the IP address? And then DHCP server going to provide you the IP address automatically. So you do not have to configure IP address manually. So let's have a look upon if we select the DHCP option. So once we select the DHCP option, you can see all this static IP information is grayed out, and it also picked up one of the IP address here we see, but this is not something the coming from DHCP server, because I haven't configured DHCP server yet. This is have been picked up by on its own, like some automatic IP addressing. So you can understand how DHCP works, like you need to configure DHCP server in order to work this option. So let's provide our IP address back 192.168.10.11 and subnet mask /24. So what other information we see here, which is the default gateway, we haven't configured that. We also have DNS server, we haven't configured that either, but we are going to use the DNS server when we are going to discuss about the host name. Since we were able to understand about some information being configured on the PC, now let's try to make some communication between the computers.